The day the trucks arrived, he knew something was wrong. By sunset, his quiet creek was gone. What happened next would shake an entire luxury neighborhood to its core, and months later, the people who laughed at him would beg for answers. Ethan Walker had lived beside Willow Creek for 30 years. The narrow ribbon of water curved behind his modest farmhouse, reflecting the sky like polished glass. His father had taught him to fish there. His mother had planted willow trees along its banks. To Ethan, the creek wasn't just water. It was memory, so when he saw construction trucks rumbling through the gated entrance of the new luxury subdivision uphill, he felt uneasy. The HOA board had promised improvements to control drainage. They said it would protect property values. They said it was necessary. Then he saw gray concrete pouring down the slope like a slow river of stone. He rushed toward the fence line and watched in disbelief as workers redirected runoff straight into the natural channel. They weren't reinforcing it. They were burying it. Ethan called the HOA office. The president's assistant dismissed him politely. "All permits are approved," she said. "It's progress." Progress. Within days, the creek behind his home hardened into a shallow concrete trench. The water that once flowed freely now rushed unnaturally fast, echoing against stone. The willow roots began to dry. Neighbors in the luxury homes applauded the change. They said flooding would never threaten them again. They trusted their board. Ethan stood alone beside the silent banks, feeling something deeper than anger. He felt a warning, because nature never forgets, and it never forgives shortcuts. What no one realized was that the ground beneath those beautiful homes had been whispering a secret for years. The neighborhood celebrated their upgrade with champagne on polished decks. Ethan watched in silence as the first cracks began to form. Months passed, and Willow Creek no longer sang. Instead, stormwater raced through the concrete channel, slamming into the bend behind Ethan's land before disappearing under the subdivision. He noticed small shifts first, soil pulling away from fence posts, subtle dips in the earth near the gated entrance. Nothing dramatic. Just quiet warnings. He tried again to speak with the HOA president, Diane Harper. She greeted him with a rehearsed smile and a firm tone. "Our engineers assured us this would stabilize everything," she said. "You should be grateful." Grateful, Ethan walked back home, unsettled. He had spent decades studying the land, planting along the banks, understanding how the creek absorbed heavy rain by spreading gently into the soil. Concrete changed that rhythm. It forced water to move faster, harder, deeper. Then came the autumn storms. Rain fell for 3 days straight. The concrete channel roared like a highway of water. Instead of soaking into earth, the flow shot directly toward the luxury lots built on soft, layered soil. On the fourth morning, a homeowner noticed her patio tilting slightly toward the garden. Another saw a thin crack zigzagging across his driveway. The HOA sent reassuring emails. Normal settling. Nothing to worry about. But Ethan noticed something they didn't. The ground near the highest property line had begun to sink ever so slightly, like a breath being pulled downward. He stood at the edge of his land, staring uphill at the polished homes. The creek had been patient, but the earth was shifting, and it was only the beginning. The first real sign came quietly. In the middle of a sunny afternoon, a marble fountain in the center courtyard tilted 3 inches to the left. At first, residents blamed poor installation. Contractors were called. Measurements were taken. Adjustments were made. But within weeks, the fountain leaned again. Then came the doors that wouldn't close properly. Windows that jammed. Kitchen tiles that cracked overnight. The HOA board called an emergency meeting. Diane stood confidently at the podium, assuring homeowners that luxury foundations were built to endure far worse conditions. She blamed seasonal moisture, normal expansion, minor engineering shifts, but during the meeting, a low murmur spread through the room. One homeowner had hired an independent inspector. His report was simple but devastating. The rapid redirection of water through the concrete creek had increased subsurface erosion beneath the hillside. Instead of dispersing naturally, water pressure had carved invisible channels underground, weakening the soil supporting several homes. Diane dismissed the report as exaggerated, until another storm arrived. This time, after heavy rain, one driveway sank nearly 2 inches overnight. Not dramatically. Not catastrophically. But enough to terrify the neighborhood. Insurance companies began asking questions. Property values paused. Buyers hesitated. Ethan said nothing publicly. He simply documented everything, photos of erosion patterns, soil shifts, changes in water speed. He had warned them months ago. They had laughed. Now, as luxury walls developed hairline fractures like veins across marble, fear replaced celebration, and someone finally began to ask a question no one wanted to hear: who approved the concrete in the first place? The answer was buried in paperwork no one had bothered to read, and when it surfaced, it changed everything. During the investigation, a county official quietly reviewed the drainage modification permits. What he found unsettled him. The HOA had fast-tracked approval by categorizing the project as surface reinforcement, not structural alteration, but redirecting natural water flow into a reinforced channel wasn't minor, it was foundational. Engineers revisited the site with ground-penetrating equipment. The results confirmed Ethan's quiet suspicion. The hillside soil was clay-heavy and naturally absorbent. For decades, the creek had acted as a release valve, slowing runoff and distributing pressure evenly. Concrete had removed that balance. Now water shot through like a fire hose beneath manicured lawns, eroding support layers invisibly. At the next HOA meeting, Diane's confident posture faltered for the first time. Residents demanded answers. Some homes required immediate stabilization work. Estimates reached staggering numbers. How could this happen? One homeowner asked. Ethan finally stood. He didn't shout. He didn't accuse. He simply explained how the creek had worked before. How nature managed itself when allowed to breathe. How concrete forced something gentle into something aggressive. The room fell silent. Months earlier, they had seen him as an obstacle to progress. Now he was the only one who truly understood the land beneath their feet, and as repair costs mounted and legal notices circulated quietly among residents, Diane realized something far worse than sinking patios awaited her: accountability. What began as hairline cracks became financial fractures, and the board members who once applauded the project now faced difficult choices. Homeowners filed formal complaints against the HOA. Insurance adjusters declined full coverage, citing improper modification of natural drainage systems. Repair bids multiplied faster than anyone anticipated. Luxury homes that once symbolized prestige now required foundation reinforcements, soil injections, and structural monitoring. Meanwhile, Ethan's modest farmhouse stood steady. The section of land untouched by concrete remained stable because it still allowed water to spread naturally before entering the trench. Reporters began visiting. Not for drama, but for explanation. How did you know? One asked him. He answered simply. Water always finds balance. If you force it, it finds another way. Legal advisors warned the HOA board that negligence claims could follow. Meeting minutes were reviewed. Emails surfaced showing internal doubts raised before construction began. Diane had dismissed those concerns, calling them overly cautious. Now homeowners whispered about leadership changes. The most painful realization wasn't the cost of repairs. It was the realization that the problem had been preventable, and that one man they ignored had tried to protect them all. As winter approached, the subdivision felt different. The champagne celebrations were replaced with contractor trucks and soil testing crews. The creek continued rushing through its concrete channel, louder than ever, but beneath the luxury streets, the earth was still adjusting, and the final consequence had not yet arrived. The turning point didn't come with a storm, it came with a vote. At a special HOA assembly, homeowners gathered with quiet determination. Financial summaries revealed millions in projected stabilization costs. Legal counsel confirmed what many already suspected: responsibility traced directly to the board's decision. Diane stood once more at the podium. But the confidence that once defined her voice had softened. She spoke of intentions, of protecting property values, of trusting professional advice, yet the meeting minutes showed she had overridden a recommendation to conduct a deeper soil impact study. One clause in the HOA bylaws allowed removal of leadership by majority vote in cases of mismanagement affecting community safety. Ballots were cast. The result was clear. Diane's tenure as president ended that evening. A new interim board immediately voted to commission environmental engineers to restore partial natural flow to the creek. Sections of concrete would be removed, allowing controlled absorption zones to rebuild stability. The process would take years and money, but something shifted in the neighborhood that night. For the first time, they listened to Ethan not as an outsider, but as a steward of the land they all depended on. He didn't celebrate. He simply walked back to the creek, watching winter sunlight reflect against stone. Change had come, but restoration would demand patience. And months later, when the final engineering report was released, it revealed the full cost of ignoring nature, a cost far greater than anyone imagined. The final report arrived quietly in early spring, and it carried the truth no one could deny: the luxury subdivision would require phased soil stabilization for the next 5 years. Several homes would need partial foundation reconstruction. Property values would recover slowly, but only if the creek's natural balance was restored. The hidden clause that changed everything wasn't just in the bylaws, it was in the land itself. The original environmental assessment, conducted years before construction, had clearly recommended preserving natural water dispersion along Willow Creek. That recommendation had been archived, never fully implemented. When the document resurfaced, homeowners realized something profound. The earth had warned them long before Ethan did. Concrete had silenced the creek's gentle rhythm. And in doing so, it amplified the consequences. Under new leadership, sections of the trench were redesigned to include permeable banks and vegetation buffers. Willow saplings were planted again along the restored bends. Months later, as spring rain fell, the water moved differently, slower, softer, steadier. The sinking had stopped. The neighborhood learned that progress without understanding carries a price. And that wisdom often lives in the quiet voices we overlook. Ethan stood beside the flowing water, watching sunlight shimmer across its surface. The creek was not exactly as it once was, but it was healing. And so was the community, and that was the final twist in this unbelievable HOA story. If you love the drama, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment sharing your thoughts. It really helps this channel grow.